The first time I saw the dead girl in the forest, I was 6 years old. I was playing in the forest and running behind the trees in a dark, damp place where the sunlight didn't reach well. The smell of fragrance and stench filled the whole place, the scent of cool air flowing quietly. Birds flew, squirrels played, and everything was fine. Then, suddenly I saw her. She was lying on the ground in a dry stream. She was wearing a light pink dress. The dress was the first thing that caught my attention because pink is my favorite color. Her hair was a light chestnut color, and her eyes were blue, wide open, with blood at the corners of her mouth. Her age was about the same as mine, or maybe a little older. I remember very clearly the first time I saw her. I wasn't afraid at first. After all, I was just a child, and I didn't realize how serious it was. I was too curious and naive to understand the gravity of the situation. I knelt beside her and looked at her. I didn't care that my clothes got dirty. I whispered to her, "Are you okay?" Then, I heard a powerful and evil voice, an empty voice with no feeling. It sounded like an old witch's voice coming from the girl's mouth. She spoke harshly, telling me, "You shouldn't be here." My heart nearly stopped from fear. My body was trembling, and I was shocked. Her eyes were fixed, lifeless, and her lips didn't move. The voice came from everywhere, but I was sure it was her voice. "Get out of here." I was scared, then sure I was scared. I ran fast, terrified. When I got home, I told my father what I had seen, crying. My father took his gun and went to the forest to search for it himself. After about half an hour, he returned, saying there was nothing in the forest, especially not where I described. He was kind to me, saying, "There's nothing there. Your imagination is just a bit wide." I stamped my feet on the ground and insisted. It wasn't imagination. It was real. My mother hugged me tightly and said, "Darling, you must never enter the forest again," and I decided to listen to her words. The second time I saw the dead girl in the forest, I was 8 years old. I was coming home from school with my friends. We were late, so we decided to take a shortcut through the forest. Almost halfway, she appeared in front of us. The same girl in the same dress. But this time, she was standing in front of me, and her hair was flying in the wind as she shouted angrily and fearfully, "Get out of here." We ran, each of us going in a different direction, screaming in fear. There were 5 girls with us that day, but when we all got home, only 3 were there. Jane and Deborah were missing. Later that night, rescue teams found them tied to a tree, naked and slaughtered. Whoever did this to them had no trace. For weeks after this, the dead girl appeared to me in a dream and screamed at me, "I told you to stay away. You should have listened to my words." The third time I saw the dead girl in the forest, I was 10 years old. I remember it well. My brother and I were playing with a ball in the backyard when the ball flew over the fence and into the forest. I went in to get it, and from behind a tree, I caught a glimpse of pink. At night, I heard my father talking to my mother. They had found the body of a girl named Susan Britt. She had been stabbed 38 times and was lying in a hole in the middle of the forest, naked, just like the others. My parents decided to move to a new house, far from the forest. But this nightmare didn't end. Every 2 years, we would hear about a new incident, a girl or 2 found dead in the forest. The killer was unknown and left no trace, like a ghost. The police suspected the villagers and even questioned us, but in the end, no evidence was found. The 4th time I saw the dead girl in the forest, I was 16 years old. I was visiting a friend, and it was late when my boyfriend called me and broke up with me on the phone. I was crying, running through the dark. Suddenly, amidst my tears, I realized I was in the forest at night, alone. She was standing in the middle of the forest, invisible in the darkness, but the moonlight revealed her pale skin. Her eyes were filled with anger, and she screamed at me with fear, "Run!" I wanted to escape, but my feet were paralyzed by fear. Before I knew it, a strong, masked man appeared, his eyes filled with anger and madness. He grabbed my hand tightly. I couldn't resist, couldn't escape, and I couldn't scream. I was terrified. He held my breath as he dragged me deeper into the forest, to a dark place where the moonlight couldn't reach. He made me lie on my stomach and, with a heavy stone, he broke my back. I heard the sound of my spine cracking. The pain was unbearable. I couldn't feel my legs. I lost control of my bladder and wet myself from fear and pain. He knew I was paralyzed. He knew I couldn't move, and he kept hitting me. Blood poured from my body as my ribs cracked from the beating. I closed my eyes, unable to fight anymore. I thought I was going to die, just like Janet, Deborah, Susan, and the girl in the pink dress. I was just another victim, and the killer was that bastard. I was dizzy from the pain and couldn't focus. My face was covered in blood and tears. I fought against fainting, struggling to stay conscious. Then I grabbed a stone and raised it in my hand. He didn't notice. I hit him hard in the face. He fell on his back, stunned. I was sure I would die, but at least I could die with honor, defending myself. As I looked at him, he angrily stood up, but he didn't reach me in time. Suddenly, she appeared out of the darkness, holding a heavy tree branch. She hit him with it. He turned to face her, but I could see from his movements and resistance that he was afraid of her. She hit him on the head again until he fell. I don't know if he fainted or died, but he fell motionless. After that, I let the branch fall to the ground. She looked at me and cried. I whispered in a weak voice, "It's over now." And then she disappeared completely. At first, let me quickly introduce myself to you. I work a job called Night Listener. There are many like me all over the world, although we are not famous, and it could be the first time you hear about this job. During the day, I'm just an ordinary college student like any other college student, but during the night, I'm the only midnight listener on campus. From midnight to 2 a.m., I open my office door to all students who want someone to hear them, even if they want to admit something without revealing their identity or saying their names. I am a midnight listener, and it's simply my job to listen to people. I have an office that the university has assigned to me, and in the middle of the office, there is a heavy black curtain that prevents me from seeing anyone or prevents any students from seeing me. They talk about their personal or academic problems, solve issues, share their secrets, or even discuss psychological problems. They enjoy being able to talk about everything without revealing their identity or being judged. Honestly, I often forget what they tell me. The whole thing is about unloading psychological baggage for students. Of course, there are things I don't forget, and what I'm about to tell you today is a story I'll never forget, no matter what happens. I will tell you the story of Tony, a student at the university. About a month ago, Tony disappeared completely without any trace. At first, it seemed normal, but after a long time with no response to any calls or messages, his friends started to get scared. They informed the police, set up search campaigns, and put up posters, but unfortunately, there was no result. About a week after his disappearance, the police received an anonymous call saying that Tony had returned to his room. The police ignored the call, thinking it was a prank by a crazy person. At 4 a.m., the police received a second call from the university administration. This time, they informed the police that the room next to Tony's in the student dormitory had complained about violent sounds coming from his room. When they sent someone to check, They found Tony's body hanging in his room. According to those who discovered the body, it was swinging back and forth without any logical reason or breath of air. The loud sound was from the body swinging so violently that it was hitting the wall. The body stopped moving completely when they arrived. When the surveillance cameras in the dormitory were checked, they showed Tony walking toward his room drunk. The strange thing was that Tony was limping with one foot, but Tony had never limped before. The investigators couldn't explain it, and the case ended as a suicide, although no one ever knew what happened during the week he disappeared. I wasn't interested in the case because I didn't know Tony personally, and it was far from me. But everything changed when Ryan came to talk to me. A few days after they found Tony's body, I had someone come into my office. I wasn't sure who it was, but I felt him sitting down on the chair and sighing. I said to him, "I'm a night listener. What would you like me to call you?" He was silent for a while and didn't answer. I said to him again, "If you don't want to tell me your name, you can use any other name." He said, "Call me Ryan," and then he paused for a while before asking, "I don't know how, but I have a question. Do you see me?" I reassured him and told him that I couldn't see anything through the curtain. He said in a tense voice, "Good, because I don't want you to think I'm crazy when I tell you what happened. I can't tell the police or any of my colleagues." He paused for a moment and continued, "I want to tell you about Tony. Surely you know him or have heard of him." I said, "Of course I know him." He nervously replied, "Tony and I were very close friends. I was with him the last time he was alive. I'm one of the people who brought him back to his room after we stayed up at the abandoned house next to the university. You know it, right?" Of course, I knew what he was talking about. The abandoned house located at the edge of the university. I said, "I know it," and he continued his story. "It was the first time we went there. We had food and liquor, listened to music, and danced until 4 a.m. We decided to leave, but there was a huge old tree next to the house. Tony decided to climb it. Tony was always bragging about his body. He jumped up and grabbed a big branch, shaking it so hard that leaves started to fall. We were drunk and laughed, encouraging him. Then I noticed something in the dark corner, almost hidden, flowers and fruit. I was drunk, so I couldn't see well. I asked him if those were flowers and fruits like those placed on graves. He immediately replied, "Yes, that's exactly it." I knew there was a cemetery nearby, and I knew this was wrong. So I asked Tony to stop, but before I could finish my sentence, the branch broke and Tony fell to the ground. He fell right onto the flowers and fruit, completely scattering them. Tony was drunk and didn't know what he was doing. I felt something bad was going to happen, so I decided we had to leave. We got in the car and left. But the strange thing was that Tony stayed completely silent the whole time, like he was spaced out. That wasn't Tony's habit. I drove each of us home, and Tony was the last. I helped him back to his room because he was acting so strange. The next day, he completely disappeared without a trace. Even his best friend didn't know anything about him. Ryan finished his story and left. After a while, I returned to my room, my mind racing. I opened Google and started searching for the history of the abandoned house. About an hour later, I found an important article written 8 years ago about the house. When I read the article, I immediately understood everything that happened to Tony. 8 years ago, there was a man named Roger Oliver. He worked in a wood factory in a village near the university. He had a wife and 2 sons. One day, while working on a wood-cutting machine, his arm was completely severed. They managed to save him, but he had to have his arm amputated. After being dismissed from the factory, he couldn't find another job due to his injury. He became depressed, isolated from people, and left his family. He went to the abandoned house and hanged himself on a branch of the tree, away from his children so they wouldn't see him. When his body was found, the wind was blowing him back and forth. His family, devastated by the loss, continued to visit the tree once a month, placing roses and fruit under it as a tribute to Roger. After reading the article, I knew exactly what I had to do. The next morning, I went to the supermarket next to the university, bought some things, and then went to the abandoned house. It wasn't difficult to find the place Ryan mentioned. Even though more than a week had passed, there were still beer bottles, cigarette butts, food wrappers, and empty cans lying around. I started cleaning the place, collected all the trash, and put it in my car to dispose of. I then took out the roses and fruit I had brought and replaced the ones that Tony had scattered. Before leaving, I stood there and prayed for Roger. After a brief silence, I spoke to him, saying, "I don't know how to apologize, but I came and cleaned this place. I've placed roses and fruit for you, and I want to tell you that your family loves you very much." I paused for a moment and continued, "I'm very sorry for what happened to Tony. He was a kind person, but he was drunk and foolish. He didn't mean to scatter the roses and fruit. I prayed for you a lot." When I turned and headed to my car, I suddenly felt a warmth in the place. I felt something strange was going to happen. My body was trembling, and my hair stood on end. It felt as if someone was breathing behind me. Suddenly, I heard a whisper from behind. The whole story begins with a husband, wife, and a small son. There is a mother whose son is constantly crying. She got tired of him and the sound of his crying, so she decided to lock him in the bathroom. Then, she went to the kitchen to prepare food. After half an hour, when the sound of the baby crying stopped, the mother went to the bathroom to look for him, but she did not find her son. The mother was in a state of shock from not finding him in the bathroom. She thought maybe he went outside to play, so she went to look for him all over the house. Then, she heard the sound of a baby crying in the bathroom again. She went to look into the bathroom, but found nothing, only the sound of crying. The father returned from work, and the mother told him everything. They went to the police station to report the disappearance of the child. The father then asked his wife, "Is there any reasonable person who would lock their son in the bathroom?" As she was about to respond, he beat her. She then asked him for a divorce, so he immediately divorced her, took his clothes and belongings, and left the apartment. The mother remained alone at home. One night, when she was sleeping, she heard her child crying from the bathroom. She went to see the source of the sound, but found nothing. The next day, she went to her friend and told her what had happened. Her friend said, "I know someone who can help us find your son." The person came to the house, went to the bathroom, and told the mother and her friend to leave the bathroom and close it from the outside. He instructed them to open the door immediately when he gave them the signal. Hours later, the man came out of the bathroom. He told the mother that when her son was locked in the bathroom, his consort did not like it and hired some mirror servants from inside the bathroom to come to our world and use the woman as a gateway to enter our world. They took the child and went again through the woman. Until now, the child has not been found. The mother separated from the father and went to live with her parents in another province. The father, too, could not stay in the apartment due to the constant crying sounds that started every night from the second hour until the call to dawn. He left the apartment, and the landlord decided to close it until a new resident was found. One day, a family from the countryside moved into the apartment because the rent was very cheap. The family consisted of a husband, wife, and a small son. On the first day, nothing happened, but on the second day, they started to hear a crying sound coming from the bathroom. They initially thought the sound was coming from the neighbors, and the day ended. On the third day, The father noticed that his son was going to the bathroom a lot. He asked, "Why do you go to the bathroom so often? Are you sick?" The son replied, "No, Dad, I'm playing with my friend in the bathroom." The father asked, "Who is this friend of yours in the bathroom?" The son said, "It's a secret between me and him." The father replied, "Go from here. I don't have time for this children's nonsense." The son went back and sat in the bathroom for a very long time. The mother became worried and went to get him. She found her son standing in front of the mirror in the bathroom, talking and laughing as though he were talking to someone inside. The mother warned him not to do this again, but while she was preparing food in the kitchen, the son went back to the bathroom and stayed in there for a very long time. The mother went to open the bathroom door, but it wouldn't open. She kept calling to the boy inside, but she didn't hear any sound. The door was closed, and the husband was at work. The mother asked some neighbors to help her break the door. They broke it down, and when they entered the bathroom, they found all corners of the bathroom filled with blood, but her son was nowhere to be found in the apartment. The mother was shocked by the situation when one of the neighbors told her that the apartment had been haunted since the child disappeared last year. The neighbor said, "I warned the owner of the building, but he didn't believe me." The mother heard this and kept screaming over the loss of her son. The neighbors brought someone to read some verses of the Quran, and suddenly the lights in the house went out. The mother heard terrifying sounds coming from the bathroom, children crying and laughing in a terrifying way. She said she saw a dim light coming from the balcony overlooking the street. The mother then heard the screams of the man reading the Quran, saying, let me go, I'm not coming here again." Through the light, the mother saw children with pale, blue faces as if they were dead, along with other strange beings that were difficult to describe. She pulled the man into the bathroom, and the broken door was repaired in a second and closed from inside the bathroom. After a minute of horror and panic, the lights in the house came back on. The mother went to check on the man locked inside the bathroom. When she opened the door, she found the bathroom mirror full of blood. The father was traveling on a business trip abroad at that time. When he returned, he found neither the mother nor the son in the house. Only the furniture was left. He left the apartment and has not returned since. Some residents of the building say that when they pass in front of the apartment at night, they hear screams and strange sounds coming from the apartment. Eventually, all the residents left the building because they were terrified of the sounds coming from the apartment at night.